Hi, and welcome to Rethink Dialogue. In this episode, we're going to sit down with K Rohrs, who is the Vice President of Marketing Insights at ExactTarget. And he's also the author of the book Audience. Let's go and sit down and talk to him and see what he has to say. Hi, Jeffrey. Welcome to Rethink Dialogue.
Yeah, thank you.
First question I always ask is, tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, personally and professionally.
Sure. I am, as my bio states, recovering attorney. That's probably a good place to start. I practiced for a couple of years before realizing that being a litigator is reliving the worst moments of other people's lives. And that was not a place I wanted to be in terms of career trajectory.
Okay.
And I noticed this theme coming up on my reviews, which said he was creative, but they didn't mean that necessarily as a compliment in the legal world. But I jumped ship in the mid-90s to LexisNexis at a time that they were migrating from installed software for research for legal purposes, both in law schools and law firms, to what we'd now call cloud-based, but it was simply Lexis.com at the time.
Yeah.
And I got on some product review teams of the early versions of Lexis.com, Shepherds.com, research tools. And then some competitors came out with some really innovative natural language search technologies and algorithmic site checking. And competitively, we had the much better product in the market at the time. And so I started creating some of my own marketing materials to use in my law firm. And those got picked up by our national marketing team, and kind of the light went off in my head because I had a master's in mass communication, but I'm not classically trained in marketing or business. And so I'm like, aha, you know, I had used this thing called the internet in '94 in my master's program, and I knew I wanted to come back toward it. And so I jettisoned to a digital marketing firm. And that was right during the height of the bubble. So when the bubble popped, a bunch of us jettisoned to an agency where after a couple of years I helped build the email, the search marketing practice, website development, and then the nascent social media practice. And I became president of that agency for a few years, where I helped strengthen the relationship with ExactTarget. So ExactTarget, we were one of the original reseller partners at my agency of ExactTarget. Back then it was simply just an email marketing platform. And lo and behold, in about 2006, Scott Dorsey, the CEO, approached me at a conference, said, would you ever consider joining? And a year later I joined. And since then it's been a pretty wild ride as we've grown extensively, and my role has always had some neat twists and turns to it. So at different points in my career, I ran interactive marketing for a short period of time. I built our content marketing, our initial social media marketing efforts, and I've always held the reins on kind of thought leadership, research. Essentially started our Subscribers, Fans, and Followers research series about 4 years ago. Okay. And ultimately that's what gave rise to my book Audience.
Yeah. Ah, good transition.
I used to be a DJ too, so I'm good at segues.
So that was my next question. You just written that book, Audience.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the book.
Sure. So was approached by Wiley last March, so a year ago, almost probably to the day as we're talking. And they were interested in having me write something. And we had 4 years of research into the changing nature of relationships between consumers and brands, as defined by whether they're a subscriber, a fan, or a follower. And so I pitched them that kind of a book. And then when I went to write it last April, May, and June, part of July, it became this bigger notion. And I realized that there is essentially a vocation and a responsibility in marketing that's largely going unserved, and that is of audience development. Because one of the fundamental changes in the internet era is that companies can now build direct relationships, as we know, with consumers. It started with email, transitioned in all the social and mobile channels, obviously the website, personalization that you can do through advertising now. But nobody really owns audience development. So you have this huge content marketing machine, right? As companies jump in wholeheartedly, they love that. What do you know? I've got instantaneous worldwide distribution of anything I put out there. But they assume an audience that usually doesn't exist. And they assume somebody's building that audience. So you have 99% of the effort going into content and 1% going into audience development. So the book is really about the the heart and soul of this notion of audience development as a core marketing responsibility, and audience as a real monetary business asset for the company.
So, in your perspective, what is the role of marketing today? What's different? Because things have changed.
Oh, absolutely. So, the first CMO, there wasn't anybody with a CMO title, to my knowledge, until the mid-'80s when Pepsi had the first chief marketing officer. So when you understand that, we're dealing with a really compressed time relative to the history of business where marketing has grown and matured. The internet has accelerated that pace because with the internet you have disruptive technology and direct relationship with consumer. And while IT has been a strong partner in that, ultimately the force that I think helps propel innovation and helps propel an understanding of how to best serve that customer is the marketing engine. Because you've got to make sure the experiences are positive. You've got to make sure that the product development folks are listening to the marketplace, that they are responding, and they're responding in kind with products and services that serve real needs. And so marketing having to work more collaboratively with peers as opposed to just being focused on brand execution and relying on third parties to build the audiences for them that they just put up 30, 60-second, one-page sheets of advertising. So now what you have is much more of a media company in terms of what marketing is. And you hear this a lot, that every company is a media company.
Yeah.
Which is true if you truly embrace that. But a media company doesn't just have editorial, it also has the audience development piece. And so I think one of the fundamental changes that's going to happen is this embrace of, we have to create the content, but we also need a person or a team thinking about how do we get more email subscribers, Facebook fans, Twitter followers, Instagram followers, et cetera, how do we keep them engaged, because engagement equals attention, and ultimately marketing is about getting more attention that you can convert into positive action for your brand. And then ultimately how do you convert that into greater value? Usually it's going to be monetary, but in some instances it might be more amplification, it might be greater visibility within certain markets you haven't penetrated yet. So marketing has this much more multifaceted way of measuring success. It's still ultimately responsible for helping fuel sales. I mean, you can't step away from that. But when you look at how then social media has helped transform it as well, marketing also has a stake in customer service, because poor customer service can potentially equal to negative amplification, which can tank all of the best marketing programs that you have. So, if I were to sum it up, I'd say marketing is now a far more collaborative, it has to be far more innovative, and it has to also be much more of a curator of both content and audience, and thinking like a media company of how do we bring a bigger, better, more responsive audience to the table with each and every product release or service update or whatever we have. And so that's a formidable challenge.
So I guess everything that you're doing, all the work that you're doing, you also had a look upon channels. So which channels would you reckon are the most effective ones?
So hands down, email is a place where most businesses need to start. It's not sexy, but it is the oldest digital tool. It is older than websites themselves. So email and website go hand in hand. Depending on your business, mobile app could be right there. It might actually be your entire business, right? Depending on what kind of company you are. But the reason email is so important is that it has the largest kind of install user base, right? In the U.S., about 93% of U.S. adults will subscribe to permission-based emails. Those are direct messages sent to the inbox where you can measure interaction. That's very different than Facebook, which has penetration somewhere in the 60% range of likes. But as we know, likes are much thinner than an opt-in for an email. A like is a very thin positive sentiment that only gives you so much traction in the news feed. Same thing with a follow in Twitter, because the news feed and the Twitter feed are both kind of waterfalls. So you're looking at a lot more content running by during the day that a consumer ultimately can miss. So time and time again, when I talk to marketers, kind of some of them it's their whispered secret because they don't want to give it away. Others are like, yeah, email hands down is where I would start. Where you go from there really depends on your business, your competitive set, and what your strengths are. Because one of the, I think, underappreciated challenges today is that your brand and the character of your brand can dramatically impact where you're most effective. So, case in point, let's say, M&M's. M&M's has their little, humanoid characters, the little walking, talking M&M guys. They're funny, they're humorous in the commercials, they have personalities outside that can translate to social media. You compare that to Nestle Smarties, which are faceless, just colored pieces of candy. They haven't used brand to essentially give character and life to their product. So it basically allows M&M to do certain types of marketing that they can't. Or a better example today, and being where we are globally right now, would be Lego, right? You've got Lego. When I think of Lego, I think of little bricks that I'd make stuff with and usually step on, right, when I was a kid. Well, now you think of Lego, and it's it was just the #1 movie worldwide. It's a phenomenon, right? They've created and they've jumped from just being a toy brand into being kind of this lifestyle brand and also a content brand. Now, if you are another maker of bricks that kids can build stuff with, you are at a distinct disadvantage to what Lego has done. So when you ask the question, where would you start? You need to know, what brand am I talking about? And what does the competitive set do? Does your brand lend itself to comedy, humor, really interesting content? All of these kind of things begin to say, oh, okay, well, you might want to go play in YouTube. You might, you've got a really good community. Your community's already talking about you. Well, how do we amplify that? So those are some of the questions. But at the heart and soul, you've got brand, you've got website, you've got email, and then you're going to start selecting some of the other ones that are going to resonate the most with your consumers.
You mentioned in your book hybrid marketing. What the?
So hybrid marketing is this concept, and it's something I was talking about on the road for a few years. It is the notion that we are the hybrid marketing generation, and by that I mean, if you go back to, 2 marketing generations ago, all right, pre-1990s, that generation came out, and what they needed to master were creative skills. And the reason they needed to master creative skills is because 9 times out of 10, what they were doing is going out and buying paid media and filling that media with creative, television commercials, print advertisements, what have you. And the creative was where they were going to win. Paid media is very much like a fossil fuel, right? I go to the petrol station, I pick up the pump, the energy, which is attention from consumers, has been aggregated by some other third party, usually a television network, a print publication, a radio station. They've aggregated the audience attention. And now I'm just pumping that into the brand. And we're going to drive off for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and hopefully get enough attention. But when that time is over, when that campaign runs its course, I got to come back around. Even if I have the best creative in the world, I still have to fill it up with audience, attention. So the core of marketing's history is built upon the fossil fuel metaphor. That's paid media. Then you've got the rise of owned media. So my website, my Facebook page, my Twitter feed, my mobile app, all of these things that are my owned media that I can create. This is akin to renewable energy, right? It's the promise of solar and wind power and these wonderfully romantic notions that we all hope are going to bring a cleaner future for us in reality. And in marketing, we're hoping it's going to bring us more leads and opportunities and sales at less cost. We would like nothing more than cold fusion. We would like to just put something out there and everybody just comes and generates all this energy and we didn't have to do anything and we just get accolades and promotions. The truth is, however, that owned media is great, but as I've learned here in Oslo today, the sun goes behind the clouds, so the solar panels don't work as well. The wind dies down, so the wind turbines don't blow. So you can't just totally rely on owned media.
No.
So then you have this third thing, and it's the holy grail of viral, right? And that is really the kinetic energy of the consumer being harnessed for the company. That's in the form of, really that that earned media piece, right? Where the consumer is going to now take your message or a variant and broadcast it out to their audience. And that comes at no cost to you. I mean, that's why it's the holy grail. I want more earned media. Who doesn't want more earned media? But I can't bank on earned media. I can't bank on somebody reacting always in the same way and amplifying. Marketers are caught all the time off guard by both positive and negative amplification.
Yeah.
So now you have those three things. You have the fossil fuel of paid media, you have the renewable energy of owned, and you have the kinetic energy of earned media. That's why I say we're the hybrid marketing generation. Never before has anybody had to figure out how to stitch these things together. And so in my presentations, I talk about how we're a lot like Tesla engineers, the Tesla Model S, being a electric car, but when I plug that in, what am I plugging it into? I'm plugging it into the grid. Where does the electric grid get most of its power around the globe? Usually coal or oil or other fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And so Tesla's working very hard to get more energy out of that vehicle, make it less dependent on fossil fuel. But they're engineering it literally as it goes down the road. We're doing the same thing as brands. We can't afford to stop our whole sales process, marketing process. We're literally going down the road and hybrid re-engineering this, trying to get more energy out of the same amount of investment. And the smart companies are figuring out content marketing, how it cross-pollinates with social media, and then again, to my point, I think figuring out the winning aspects of building audiences, because that's where the energy ultimately comes from, and all of the energy we're talking about, be it fossil fuel, renewable energy, kinetic energy of consumers, all of that is coming from the consumer, and its fundamental source of energy is the attention they give us, and can we convert that?
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded way of saying what hybrid marketing is.
I see. Which brings me, so I remember when I started doing keynotes back in 2009, I said that, we have like 3,000 impressions during one day, which is the equivalent what a person had 50 years ago in a lifetime.
Right.
Now, 4 years later, it's actually 10,000 impressions every single day. So it means, again, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of brands making that noise. So the question is, how can we tap in and make a difference when it comes to the future of marketing?
Well, I think it's going to come back to the fundamentals of creativity, right? We're doing this hybrid engineering right now because there's no rule book. After you have some more experience, you're going to know what works, what doesn't for your brand, and the dust is settling on the channels. There's not as much rapid expansion. We're kind of past the big bang of social media, right?
Yeah.
But I would say, to your point, I don't think it's 10,000 impressions of commercial impressions. It's 10,000 things competing for your attention, right? I mean, a decade ago or more, I didn't get as much content from my friends and family as I do today.
No.
Right? I'm tuning in on the news feed, I'm tuning in on Twitter. So brands are competing with my friends and family, with my social network for my attention.
Exactly.
And so you have to look at what resonates in those worlds. And what resonates in those worlds, essentially are things that are personally meaningful. And, to quote my friend Jay Baer, things that provide utility, that are useful. Those are the things that are going to get people talking. So at its core, you can go play the real-time media game as much as you want and get retweeted during the Oscars and everything else. But if you aren't doing the fundamentals right, if you aren't building a brand that is resonant and emotionally powerful to connect your consumers with something bigger than just this widget you're selling, there's a problem, and you're not going to resonate. You're not going to cut through the 10,000. So brand is at that core. And the next piece is then how are you ultimately serving customers? How are you being a customer company, and thinking about both on the product side and service side of how We develop things that are going to help them. And then, once it's out in the marketplace, listening to them and evolving and innovating, and if there are problems, rectifying those. Having that whole process working, and also having your lead flow and conversion to sale process working is critical. Because again, getting back to this whole energy idea, right? We ultimately want to generate 100% energy and be able to use 100% of that energy. But any storage mechanism that exists today loses some of that through inefficiencies. Like I can have a AA battery here. It's not going to have, even if it's fresh out of the package, it's not going to have 100% of the energy that was put into it. Similarly, you're going to lose things as they come through lead flow on your website or what have you. It's now about constant optimization to get just a little bit more and a little bit more and be more efficient, You hope for those breakthroughs, those big breakthroughs, but I think, you're wise to make sure that you've got all the foundational pieces in place, not just focusing on how do we hit home runs, to use a baseball analogy from the US, but how do we actually, how are we converting? Are we efficient? Are we losing 30% of the energy that we've generated, the attention converting that? If so, then the gains that you can get just by better conversion might be bigger than trying to go out and capture real-time media or cut through the 10,000.
Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned in your book is the red velvet touch.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? We're talking about marketing here,
Yeah.
an audience.
Yeah, it's a fun and somewhat strained metaphor, but it's visual.
Okay.
So there are 5 elements to what I call the red velvet touch, and it's serve, honor, deliver, surprise, delight. Okay. And you've heard elements of those. But as I was working on the book, I came back to one of the first things I worked on at Exact Target was coming up with our subscribers rule philosophy. And the subscribers rule philosophy was, at Exact Target, we're selling to companies that are using our platform for one-to-one personalized communications with their consumers. So to serve our customers, we have to serve their customers. Yeah. We have to honor their permission. We have to make sure the technology that we're building is getting to a point where it will be extremely personal and timely and relevant, all those things that we've been talking about in terms of email and one-to-one. So what I've done is I've essentially combined the serve, honor, and deliver of the subscribers rule philosophy with kind of the surprise and delight that's come out of the social movement. And that's the red velvet touch. So if you look at serve, we want to serve individuals. And so when I think of service in a red velvet fashion, I think of gloves, right? Red velvet gloves, that high touch, that, how are you going to make this person, really feel like you care, be the customer company. So having a service mentality to your marketing. Honor. Honor is about the fact that, look, they're going to express preferences to you, and this happens every single day, that people register for email or they like or they follow, and then the company markets to them like they were everybody else. They don't use any sort of data, they don't use any sort of personalization, they don't honor the permission that person gives them to use their data wisely. So honor that. That's more like a throne, right? So you are treating that customer like the king or the queen on the throne. Deliver. So deliver them timely, relevant content that improves their lives. You're up on a stage, red velvet curtain behind you, and those red velvet seats, right? You are, now as a brand, you are constantly on stage. And how are you going to deliver and entertain them? How are you going to reach those folks? You've got to be thinking about constantly, how do we maximize our touch points that we have? How do we increase the service level? How do we make that rep who's interacting with the consumer in our stores know just a little bit more about them to make it more personal? So that's the deliver piece. Surprise is the idea of the red velvet rope, right? It used to separate us and them. We used to be control of the brand. Now we're not. So now you take that red velvet rope away and you've let them into this place that, oh wow, this is where the VIPs are. I can talk directly with the brand. This is wonderful. This is surprising. It was fun at South by Southwest where I was. I got followed and retweeted by Grumpy Cat and Drew Carey, the comedian, in the same day. That was surprising. These are 2 entities, right, that you've heard of in the mass media, and all of a sudden I'm in their stream, I'm in their thought, right?
Yeah.
That's the surprise, that you're finding those ways to touch consumers. And then the delight piece, I don't know if you have this revolution going on here, but it seems like red velvet cupcakes and cakes are just the rage as a flavor. It's very trendy.
Yeah.
And that's the delight piece, right? Who doesn't want a red velvet cupcake to, magically appear on their desk some days? And so that's the fun of social, and that's the fun of mobile, is that we can, delight these folks in new ways using this technology. You think about the possibilities of geofencing and all of the things now, with iBeacon, and people get within certain mobility, and you could, bring folks in that you couldn't usually bring in, because now they can have a notice right there on their phone. And so those 5 things, serve, honor, deliver, surprise, delight, form the red velvet touch, each kind of aligning with one of those red velvet ideas. But again, just to get readers, get marketers thinking about, okay, how are we doing that? And so it's got, it's a combination of things that, a lot of my peers have been talking about for a long time, but it goes back, as I said, to our subscribers' rule philosophy, that consumer should be celebrated as the hero, and we should do everything we can to make sure they are just ecstatic about the experience.
Yeah. Wow. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does, believe it or not.
It's like, aha.
I mean, when I wrote a book, I thought I got to make it make sense. But you see so much in print these days that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I could have gone the other route.
Yeah, true.
Thought I'd go the sensible route.
So let's tune into the personal side again.
Sure.
So you said, you started saying that you went from one profession to the one that you are more comfortable, or you feel that you're excelling in. So besides that, which profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I have dabbled in screenwriting about 10 years ago, and wrote a few features and produced a short movie with a short film with a director up in Toronto.
Okay.
And having sat down and written the book, got those creative juices flowing again.
Yeah.
So the idea of being a novelist and going deep in a fictional subject is tremendously satisfying for me. Like creating a world and creating, being able to think about, how these characters you create would react to circumstance, and trying to make it resonance with, our human experience. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So the idea of being a novelist and, being able to come to Oslo or, wherever and hole up for, a few weeks or a month and be able to write about that experience and translate that into fiction is a lot of fun. So whether it be screenplays or a novel, I don't know, but what I have to do is say, I got to do that, and then eventually it'll happen.
Exactly. So what profession would you not like to do?
I mean, I've already ruled out being a litigator. That was not a lot of fun. And I have the utmost respect for people who can do that, and it is their passion, because we need, as much as we all joke about lawyers, we need people who are passionate defenders and advocates of people in need. And that's true on both sides of the aisle. If you've got disagreements, you want to have people who are willing to see both sides of an argument and ultimately advocate passionately for their clients. It's a funny question. I like that you've turned the tables, because I don't know that I've really ever thought about that. I think like being an accountant probably isn't my idea of a whole lot of fun. Working with other people's numbers and crunching them. I've dabbled in a Quicken and TurboTax and all of those things, and tax season is the worst time of the year. I love being able to hand it over to my accountant. So God love them, but I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah, same answer as me. So last question. In one simple word, if you can, what inspires you?
I would say meaning.
Meaning. Okay.
And I mean that to be as abstract as possible.
Yeah.
I think, personally, I found myself always on a search for it and wanting to, in whatever I produce, provide some sort of meaning and value. Those two words in my mind go hand in hand. And I think as you get older, you you see more of the problems of the world that have some permanence, and you hope to have a meaningful contribution to solve those. So meaning, I think, is on the tip of my tongue right now, is this wonderful amorphous thing I'm trying to discover.
Good. Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.